Today we have three students who will be talking about particular things with the encyclical that resonate with them. I asked each of them to find something in there that spoke to them, and they're going to talk personal reflections about it and pull things from it that mean something to them and that they want to discuss with you. We have Nora Martini, who is a senior chemistry major with a biology minor. She is an honors student as well, has been a pilgrim to CC. When did you go?
I just came back in January.
Okay, it's in this January. She's also a member of campus ministry and helped found with Father Brian the bereavement group here. And she's also the president of the chemistry club. We have Kwun Chan, who is a junior right now, hoping to graduate in 2017. He is a dual major in biology and nursing, very much interested in the sciences, very interested in what's going on with climate change and the environment, and particularly the poor and how it affects the poor, and that will be the focus of his talk. Nora is going to be talking about climate change. And last we have Peter Cabranes, who is a junior communications major, very much interested in film. He's actually said he might be interested in being a professor someday, so I have to give kudos to him for considering that. He was one of my first students when we talked about sustainability, and to his credit, I haven't turned him away from sustainability. I tend to go on about it way too much, I think, but he's kept the flag. He's also part of the honors program and a member of the honors cohort. Before we get started with the students, I wanted to play a little something for you. The United Nations voted on accepting 17 Sustainable Development Goals that will now have to be approved by each individual country. They're going to be meeting again in Paris to talk more about this. Every country is supposed to be developing a plan to how they're going to implement these goals. It is extremely important for the future of this planet and the future of human beings in this planet to do that. So this little thing on global goals talks about the 17 different goals that are in there.
We can be.
We must be the first generation
to end extreme poverty.
The generation
most determined
to fight injustice
and inequalities.
The generation that saves the planet from climate change.
And this is how it will get done.
The global goals.
A 15-year plan
For everyone, everywhere.
With no one left behind.
We will live in a world
where nobody
anywhere
lives in extreme poverty.
Where no one
goes hungry.
where no one
wakes in the morning
Asking if there will be food today.
We will live in a world
Where no child has to die.
Diseases we know how to cure.
And where proper health care
is a lifelong right for us all.
We will live in a world
where everyone
Goes to school.
and education gives us the knowledge
And skills
for a fulfilling life.
We will live in a world where all girls and all women have equal opportunities
to thrive
And be powerful.
and safe.
We cannot succeed if half the world is held back.
We will live in a world
Where all people can get clean water.
and proper toilets at home,
At school.
and a work.
We will live in a world where there is sustainable energy for everyone.
heat, light, and power for the whole planet.
Without destroying the planet.
We'll live in a world where economies prosper. A new wealth
Leads to decent jobs
For everyone.
and we will live in a world where our industry
our infrastructure and our
best innovations
Are not just used to make money, but to make all our lives better.
We will live in a world
Where prejudices and extremes of inequality
Are defeated.
Inside our countries,
And between different countries.
where people live in cities and communities
That are safe, progressive,
and support everyone who lives there.
where we replace
what we consume.
Planet where we put back
What we take out of the earth.
We live in a world that is decisively rolling back the threat of climate
change.
where we restore and protect the life in our oceans and seas.
will restore
and protect
life on land.
The forests,
Animals,
The earth itself.
With peace between and inside countries.
where all governments are open.
and answer to us for what they do at home and abroad.
And the justice rules.
With everyone equal before the law.
where all countries and we their people,
Work together.
partnerships of all kinds,
to make these goals
a reality.
These are the United Nations global goals
for sustainable development.
Let's get to work.
Let's make it happen.
What I would like you to do while you're listening to each one is to look for connections between each person's commentary. This is a very interconnected problem. The encyclical was very interconnected. It is you have to read it as a whole document. And it's not like individual pieces. It all sort of blends together. So look for those linkages as you listen to the students. First, we'll have Nora Martini.
So according to etymology, encyclical is from the Greek word ekyklios, kyklios meaning circle. In modern usage, it refers almost exclusively to papal documents. Current encyclicals are sent out to bishops, giving them guidance on how to lead their decrees. In the 192-page paper that was released in June, Laudato Si, or Praise Be, we see Pope Francis address climate change amongst other topics, calling for the combination of both science and religion to fight this global crisis. For those of you who don't know, Pope Francis has a master's degree in chemistry, so when he pairs religion and science, he does so from a place of personal knowledge. Pope Francis states that Christians have misinterpreted the scripture and must, quote, forcefully reject the notion that our being created in God's image and given dominion over the earth justifies absolute dominion over other creatures. Many have misinterpreted the words in the book of Genesis where God calls for dominion over creatures to reflect a lack of respect for them. The two are not mutually exclusive. Now to some science. According to the most recent research provided by NASA, our world's carbon dioxide levels stand at 400.06 parts per million, the highest level in 650,000 years. The US and China are actually the two highest contributors to this. 9 of the 10 hottest recorded years were since the turn of the millennium. We lose 258 billion metric tons of ice land per year. In 2012, the Arctic summer sea ice was recorded at the lowest extent on record. On the slide, 100 years difference, the average temperatures in 1914 versus the average temperatures in 2014. As you can see, there's been a drastic increase. We are down 1.5 million square kilometers in forest coverage. The graph shows you the difference in 20 years in million acres. The amount of forest coverage that we've lost alone between 2000 and 2012 would cover the span of Texas twice, with remaining left over. Pope Francis states, quote, each year sees the disappearance of thousands of plant and animal species, which we will never know, which our children will never see, because they have been lost forever. Polar bears are actually drowning. There is not enough ice for them where they live. Their natural habitat is being destroyed, and they can't make it to swim across from one iceland to another. And they're actually drowning from exhaustion because they can't find anywhere to rest. But you and I don't feel it. We are blessed to live in the United States, one of the richest countries in the world. With the exception of California, we have yet to see firsthand the effects of the climate crisis. As most of you may know, California is undergoing severe droughts, forest fires, and many people are losing their homes and some losing their lives. The rich countries are destroying the poor ones. Countries such as the majority of those found in Africa suffered the most from climate change. People whose profit and livelihood was off the land no longer have enough water to drink, let alone to benefit from it. So why should you care? Pope Francis said, what kind of world do we want to leave to those who come after us, to children who are now growing up? This year's Francis and Clare Week focuses on the care for creation. In May of 2014, Pope Francis addressed his audience. Creation is not a property which we can rule over at will, or even less the property of only a few. Creation is a gift. It is a wonderful gift that has been given to us so that we care for it and use it to the benefit of all. We're in the midst of a fundamental issue that is challenging our morality, our science, our faith, and the human race. The answer starts with respecting the only place that we can still call a home. And this all starts with you. And I'm done.
Hello, I'm Kwun Chan. And I'll be talking to you today about my interpretation of the encyclical. Can you hit? Yes, please. So here we see a quote from the encyclical. We know how important these are for the entire Earth and for the future of humanity. The ecosystems of tropical forests possess an enormous complex biodiversity, which is also impossible to appreciate fully yet. When these forests are burned down or leveled for purposes of cultivation within the space of a few years, countless species are lost and areas frequently become arid wastelands. So a huge problem that we're having is that we're losing all the forests, or not all the forests, but a majority of the forests that we have left. For example, last year we lost nearly 4,900 kilometers squared of Amazonian rainforest. And the years from 1970 to 2014, we lost about 761,000 kilometers squared. It's an incredible amount of rainforest, and most of the land has been converted to grazing lands for cattle. Legislation is starting to be, Legislation is starting to be put in place to stop or slow the Amazonian rainforest deforestation, but it's not happening fast enough. However, places like Madagascar have trees that take 300 years to mature, and since the 1950s, they've lost 40 to 50% of their rainforest mass coverage because of logging, slash and burning, and harvesting for charcoal. Highways, new plantations, the fencing off of certain areas, the damming of water sources and similar developments crowd out natural habitats and at times break them up into such ways that animal populations can no longer migrate or roam freely, so that some species face extinction. Alternatives exist which lessen the impact of these projects, like creation of biological corridors. So here we can understand that human expansion have caused the loss of natural habitats that animals have been dwelling in and relying on for thousands of years. An increased expansion of human urbanization of lands causes negative trends with biodiversity, so we lose species over time. And a lot of these animals wander inside of urbanized areas and are seen as pests. I believe we can fix this by more ecological impact studies and the use of ideas like wildlife corridors to help out habitat fragmentation. In this one, the Pope says that we have not yet managed to adopt a circular model of production capable of preserving resources for present and future generations while limiting as much as possible for non-renewable resources, moderating their consumption, maximizing their efficient use, and reusing and recycling. The Pope speaks a lot about a throwaway society where we have, can you hit it, please? Where we have a lot of one-use type of materials where, so for example, one-use bottles, styrofoam, things like that, or styrofoam containers for food, aluminum foil for food. We use them once and we throw them away. Well, these things don't really go away. This is a trash patch in the Indian Ocean that just circulates within it and it accumulates into something like this. There's a few of them out there. As we all know, the Great Pacific Trash Patch, things like that. And for example, plastic bags that we use on a daily basis, they take 10 to 20 years to decompose. Plastic bottles take 450 years. Glass takes millions of years. tinfoil, styrofoam, they don't actually decompose. They just are eternal. Solutions for an issue like this is be more mindful of your use. Try to reduce the amounts you use. Try to use them more than once. Please. People may well have a growing ecological sensitivity, but have not succeeded in changing their harmful habits of consumption, which rather than decreasing appear to be growing all the more. Here the Pope speaks about how people understand what they do is wrong, however, it's always a matter for change tomorrow, not today. I've had situations where I've, bought food, thought I was going to eat it, it expires, toss it out. However, we don't realize how that may accumulate over time and how wasteful we can be. Again, try to be mindful of consumption rates of resources and not to have it in the forefront of your mind, but just keep it somewhere in there. That is why the New Zealand bishops asked for the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," means 20% of the world's population consumes resources at the rate that robs the poor nations and future generations of what they need to survive. This is a boy in Sudan, southern Sudan specifically. We've seen these photos and videos on late night television where we just flip the channel immediately. We don't hear what they have to say most of the time, and we just forget about this. 20% of the world's population, which is 1.4 billion people, don't have access to clean water. And the water is filled with bacteria and parasites due to poor sewage and not being able to treat the water. I believe we could spread awareness of the direness of the situation that's been going on for decades by donating to organizations such as water.org and having people understand that they need help. There's also the damage caused by export to developing countries of solid waste and toxic liquids by the population produced by companies which operate in less developed countries in ways that they could never do at home, in countries in which they raise capital. So in most poor countries, they don't have the ability for major income, income for major refined products or things like that. So a lot of the richer countries give the income or offer income to poorer countries by asking them to use their land as landfills, where people have to live in this. Their towns developed on these landfills. I believe that a solution that we can do is reduce our waste output and think of better solutions for our waste. Sweden recently announced that 99% of their waste is recycled and the rest is burned. That burned material goes into heating for the houses in Sweden and everything is used. So perhaps we can adopt something like that. Drugs used in affluent societies creates a continual and growing demand for products imported from poorer regions where behavior is corrupted, lives are destroyed, and environment continues to deteriorate. This is a large amount of narcotics, marijuana, doesn't matter. 90% of the United States drugs enter through Mexico, and drug trade, human trafficking, things like that just destroys people's lives. And a lot of this is grown and go through other countries. A lot of it's grown in Peru, Northern Africa, Afghanistan. I spent my high school years an hour upstate in a town called Mayapack. Drug use is rampant up there. Marijuana, new age drugs, and something needs to be done to stop it. It's not some issue far away, it's nearby. I believe that we can stop it by the generic, don't do drugs, kids. And asking senators and lawmakers to put more money and resources into civil services relating to drug addiction help and prevention. These are my resources. I want you to take away from this, well, all I want you to take away from this is to read the encyclical. It's actually, I had not expected it to be such a well-informed and well-read article, but it really is. And it involves the good and bad of the world. It represents many of the world's problems and solutions, and hopefully it would inspire you to become the best person you can be. And together we can have a better world for generations to come. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for all being here. Thank you, Dr. Dilyard and Father Brian, the Provost and the President, for putting this all together, as well as Alexandra Egler. Let's give them all a round of applause, actually. I think they deserve that. So as you know, it's St. Francis and St. Clare week at the college, and we're here to talk about the Pope's encyclical. So as we've been doing, we've been discussing some points from it, and I'm going to discuss at least two and give you guys my thoughts and my overview of the encyclical. So the Pope talks about water as a human right. There's obviously no denying that. Yet there are many places around the world where there's no fresh and clean drinking water. The Pope mentions that fresh drinking water is an issue of primary importance since it is indispensable for human life. In many parts of the world, clean water seems to be in short supply. There have been many record-breaking droughts in the last few years across this country and around the world. As Nora mentioned, just look at California in the last, 4 years? It's truly incredible to see the devastation that goes on summer after summer, and people just view it as if it's 100% normal. The Pope says one particularly serious problem is the quality of water available for the poor. Every day there are diseases being spread through water, which ultimately could have been avoided. Dysentery and cholera linked to inadequate hygiene and water supplies are a significant cause of suffering and infant mortality. We have huge companies dumping waste into rivers just for the sake of dumping it, and they don't follow the effort to properly dispose of such chemicals. Look at DuPont, who recently in the news ignored in-house medical and legal advisors to reduce community exposure to their cancer-causing chemicals. There is also dumping going around the world, such as in the Sudan, parts of India, and China. The Pope made a striking point about water and consumerism. He said, even as the quality of available water is constantly diminishing in some places, there is a growing tendency, despite its scarcity, to privatize this resource and turning it into a commodity. I mean, he's 100% right. How many new bottled water companies have emerged in the last 10 years? Well, actually in the last 3. Every store needs its own bottled water, apparently. Walk into any of the 4 pharmacies in the 1-block radius of St. Francis College, and you'll see there's at least 10 different brands, including the pharmacy's own version. I think what should be dealt with instead is getting water access to the millions of people that need it in order to survive. Don't get me wrong, bottled water is a huge convenience. I mean, I catch myself sometimes using it. I mean, I try to use a reusable bottle, but the negative outweighs the positive in this situation. There's something the Pope also discussed in the encyclical, and that has to do with population growth or overpopulation. Obviously, he is seen as one of the most progressive popes of our time, if not of all time. Yet, there are some things in which he should probably have a little bit more of an open mind to. I see overpopulation, or at least population growth, as a reasonable issue. And from what we could see, he does not, at least based on the fact that he's sticking to church doctrine. He states, instead of resolving the problems of the poor and thinking how the world can be different, Some can only propose a reduction in the birth rate. You see, people who are concerned about population growth aren't necessarily trying to ignore the issue of poverty, but we're trying to get to a solution. Now, it's not going to happen through population control alone, but it helps the cause. I mean, this is a much more complex issue that we can get into later. The UN estimates that by 2030, the world needs to jump up production of food by 50%, 45% for energy, and 30% for water, regardless of waste. If the global community fails to stabilize this population growth, the report said, we risk condemning 3 billion people to extreme deprivation. You see, the Pope also does mention that he understands that population growth is it's rising a little too fast. But that instead of focusing on the population size, we're ignoring the fact that the way we distribute food in this country and around the world is flawed. I mean, he's right. We do have a huge issue with it. But there's other parts of that whole interconnection web there that he's not really talking about. Look at it this way. Look at where the population growth is swelling. It's in areas where women have the least access to contraceptives. Instead of acknowledging ways in which contraceptives have alleviated both poverty and ecological stress in countries, the Pope instead criticizes wealthier nations for the problem. And again, he's not wrong with attacking the wealthier nations, but it is not the only problem here. He mentions major institutions, those with the means of financial and political control, to take responsibility to protect the environment. But not once does he mention the Catholic Church as being one of those institutions. I suppose he doesn't want to admit that the Catholic Church's ban on contraceptives play a role in overpopulation, or at least population growth. But I would like to hear what he says personally, without adding church doctrine into the issue. I would like to hear his actual personal cause and reasons. And again, we could talk about this for a very long time, but we're gonna stick to some statistics here. Currently, the world's population is at 7.3 billion people, roughly. We reached 7 billion in 2011, so that's an increase of roughly 300 million people since the year of 2011, and about 75 million people a year since 2011. If those numbers were to stay the same through progression, in 2035, we will have roughly 8.8 billion people on the planet. We can barely support the people on the planet now with the energy consumed and the food produced, again, regardless of waste. The best way we can combat overpopulation is by getting women the education they deserve and to have level playing field as well as supply the contraceptives needed and to educate people on the proper usage. Again, it all intertwines with each other. It is a very complex issue that touches many other issues, and I hope to write a thesis possibly on this next year. And I just hope the Pope and eventually the Church can be more open-minded about the use of contraceptives. And Dr. Dilyard had asked me to talk about local initiatives and what we could do as a group of people, maybe in this school, but a group of people in this nation, to get the politicians to open their eyes to some of these things. So the Pope states in paragraph 179 that local individuals and groups can make a real difference. They are able to instill a greater sense of responsibility, a strong sense of community, and a readiness to protect others, a spirit of creativity, and a deep love of the land. We must put pressure on governments to develop more rigorous regulations, procedures, and controls. Unless citizens control political power, whether it's national, regional, or municipal, it will not be possible to control damage to the environment. I suppose I can leave you with this last quote. He states, "Here, continuity is essential, because policies related to climate change and environmental protection cannot be altered with every change of government. Results take time and demand immediate outlays, which may not produce tangible effects with any one government's term. That is why, in the absence of pressure from the public and civic institutions, meaning all of us, political authorities will always be reluctant to intervene, all the more when urgent needs need to be met." Thank you.
One comment before I open it up. There are themes that I thought sort of crossed over all three presentations, and those are themes of climate change, poverty, and inequality in access to the essentials of ensuring a good life, consumption, behavior, and action. And on action, let me ask you a question out there. How many of you buy bottled water every single day? Be honest, be honest, be honest. All right, it's good. All right. How many of you use the little water filling stations that are through those? Oh, that's excellent. That's very good. Very, very good. So I'm pleased to see that. So that's part of action. All right. Questions. Address your questions to the students and fire away.
Well, I'm not running for any political.
Nice to start off with a tough one.
Well, I mean, don't you need water to survive? I mean, I would just like to say that, but I don't know. You all need it to survive. To me, that means it's pretty much a right. You need it. The contraceptive part, again, not running for political office right now. I don't see that happening anytime soon. But I don't know, urge your politicians to do something about it. I mean, it's extremely important. I mean, it's extremely important that women have the right to contraceptive and
men.
And men, yeah, of course, us guys. But it's important. I mean, we could sit here for hours and probably talk about it, but I'm not going to do that. But yeah, we could talk after if you want.
Water is a basic need for humans, right? Can we agree? Sure. Let's see how long you could last without water. I'd say about the maximum is 3 days. So I don't think it should depend on where you were born to have the right to water, to have clean drinking water, to not have to have the women in your family go off for 4 or 5 hours to try to find water at the local source. I think that it should be available to everyone in the world. And I don't think it's too radical thinking.
Well, if you live in Bayside, then you know. You walk down Bell Boulevard and you have one trash can for all of Bell Boulevard. We have to start with putting out trash cans in New York City and across America where people can actually dispose of the waste before we start proceeding towards recyclable containers.
I would, with respect to the styrofoam, to some companies' credit, and I think Dunkin' Donuts was one of those, that they decided we're going to stick with not using styrofoam, even though it had been lifted. So that's a good sign from them. The thing about trash and recyclables, that comes down to a couple of things: behavior, individual behavior, and also community action. That more of that needs to be done. You know, yes, it can be expensive to do these things, but is it important? Yes. Is it going to add to good quality of life? Yes. Should it be done? Yes. But it's going to require individual effort from us to make sure we put things in that are recyclable into the proper containers, and then when we see that it's not, to alert somebody that it is, and to press the local governments to make sure that those services are available, as well as the local institutions where you go. I'm very happy at this school that there is a very concerted effort to do more recycling and to do things to be more environmentally friendly here. Yeah. There's always more that can be done.
One step at a time.
But one step at a time, yeah.
Known for dumping and toxic waste in water around the world. But these companies aren't like being stopped, and it's like a world-known problem. And what can we possibly do to stop these companies? Because it's not like we're making so many efforts to stop it, because the pollution's only getting worse. But you can consider this as pretty much a crimes against humanity, wouldn't you not?
Right. I mean, you could only fine them so much money.
I mean, would they be tried in courts of law to shut these companies down? I mean,
I don't
yeah.
think I'm in the place to say that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, haven't put much thought into what we could do to stop them. But I'm glad we all agree it's an issue. But I mean, do you guys even know how we can
Not use their products?
Yeah, that's probably the best.
Ask people not to use their products?
And some of them, it's hard to even not use their stuff. That's the other thing, too.
I think we also have to start with Congress and the laws in the individual states, because up until relatively recently, this wasn't even a discussion. When Al Gore spoke about this years and years ago, he was laughed at. So we need to start with, I think, laws and actually putting out fines and holding people accountable for the things that they're doing.
It's extremely complicated. In a way, some of it is regulation that you can do and enforce the regulation, but this is also a global kind of thing. You can hear about what I somewhat call exporting pollution, where companies where there is strong regulation in their home countries will find a place where their regulations are less strict and do that, but that's not right. Companies are becoming increasingly sensitive to what they're doing to the communities in which they operate. This is a corporate social responsibility thing, and more companies are realizing that their own future is tied to how well they treat the environment, what they do to reduce waste, individual little things like that. As consumers, we can, as was suggested, we could not use their products, or we can just bring attention to the companies that do that. There are levers that can be used to try to force action on the part of companies that does not involve regulation.
In terms of energy usage, particularly in the United States, because if you look at the demographic in the United States, different areas have, for example, if you take it the Middle West, that you have more of the people who work in coal industry, rather than in the East you have more energy usage, or with out West you have solar energy. So how would you, in terms of limiting the energy usage, trying to convince people who are dependent on, I mean, you can say like out-of-date types of industry, to convince them, or since they need that type of job in that industry in order to put food on the table, how would you try to influence them to say, well, this impacts not only the United States but around the globe?
Especially now, since it's an election season, you'll be hearing a lot about the whole thing with coal, and that they're trying to take jobs away from people who have coal, and all that. A lot of this is misinformation. A lot of it is twisting what's true into something that's maybe not. So it's going to require on each individual to dig in behind that when they hear something, okay, let me look into this some more. Burning carbon like coal. We are a carbon-based economy. We have to get away from that. Carbon is behind global warming. Global warming is not good. If we don't do something about global warming very soon, things are going to get really bad. So, we start from that premise. With respect to jobs and things like that, start thinking about retraining, switching from, yes, your job is in the coal mines, or working at a coal-fired energy plant, but think about retraining to go to alternatives, wind power, solar power, something else that can do that. It's going to require some government support for that retraining. It's going to be requiring a lot of infrastructural stuff, because when you switch to alternative energy sources, you have to hook it somehow to the grid, which isn't easy. But there's all sorts of things that could be done that will be productive, that are going to be better for us than just sticking with burning fossil fuels.
And my second question, in regards to economic regulation, in particular with top-bottom regulation, isn't there a tendency that you have to address that most citizens, particularly in the United States, do not like it when the government tries to initiate top-bottom regulation?
Well, I'm sure the U.S. people don't like the fact that in California they're losing their homes, and they have droughts and forest fires, and there's a lack of water, and they can't take a shower more than like once a week or something ridiculous. But that's just kind of something that we're going to have to do at this point, because we are literally ruining our planet and we have nowhere to go. So it's, yes, the people of America are going to be a little uncomfortable, but tough.
I understand the issue. It's just that there's this tendency for citizens not to like it, they don't understand, or they're kind of hesitant towards when government tends to stick their nose into affairs.
Well, this is a global affair. It's no longer an American affair. This is not, you're uncomfortable now because you can't buy your bottle of water. This is, you not buying your bottle of water is helping out the whole continent of Africa, which is in severe drought.
I understand that, but...
No, I know. I'm just saying, so Americans are going to be uncomfortable. Tough. I think the government does need to step in, and I think we are a little bit too spoiled in this country with the things that we do.
But there is a history of, especially in this country, that Americans do not like, and when government butts into their affairs, and that is, I think that's one of the issues that we need to tackle, because Americans are in their isolationist mentality, and they're not going to understand it unless it's affecting them.
We need to educate.
That last point was actually a very good one. It has to come to what does it mean for me, and why did it benefit me from doing it? We don't like to be told what to do. We don't want to be regulated in our behavior. And things like personal choices, like the whole thing with the soda and the large sodas and banning that. Part of it is education, where we understand the consequences of things that we do. With regard to energy use, you say, if I switch off my light bulb, or if I figure out a way that I can tap into a local solar generation or wind generation, or switch my windows and make more energy efficient windows or more efficient air conditioners, how will that help me? Will that reduce my energy costs? Is that going to be something that will benefit me personally? And if that can happen, then you can start combining that with other forms of regulation that might just be more palatable to each individual. A couple of comments about Sweden being large is not an excuse. There are a lot of things locally that can be done about recycling and things that could be benefit. And what I think with respect to the thing about drugs, it is a misallocation of resources. Where do drugs come from? Drugs come from South America, from places where there are a lot of poor people. Poor people get involved with drugs because it's a nice way to make money. It's a moral issue. It's a misuse of human resources and other resources, and it's a degradation of human life that we should address. And it's also it's one of those ills of society that have many fingers and many different implications, but needs to be addressed. So, thank you all for coming.